The devil from Hell's Kitchen returns, and he has his hands full with a deadly impostor and the rise to power of Wilson Fisk as New York's Kingpin of crime, when Johnnie Torch reviews Daredevil Season 3. Well, welcome in everyone to another Johnnie Torch review. This one has been a long time coming. I haven't gotten Netflix for several months, so when the Season 3 of Daredevil came out, I wasn't there with everyone else to see it when it was first released to binge it. But when Netflix gave me an offer I couldn't refuse, which was a free trial of Netflix once again, I said I'm going to take the opportunity to close out the Netflix run of Daredevil. So welcome in. We'll try to talk about this here and cover all bases relatively briefly. Make sure you hit that like button, make sure you share the video, and subscribe if you haven't already. All things considered, I was never a big Netflix Marvel fan. So just to lay the groundwork, let me say, I wasn't a huge fan of the Daredevil series, but it was more or less the best of what Marvel Netflix had to offer. I am one of the few people that really enjoyed, I think it was probably the first season of Iron Fist. But apart from that, most of the other seasons of the shows were just serviceable at best, including Iron Fist. But I mean, Luke Cage was okay, serviceable. I saw the first season of Jessica Jones was okay. Didn't care about it enough to watch the other two seasons, and I probably still won't, even with the free trial. And I'm curious about Punisher. I'm probably going to try to, zip through it fast, probably skip a few episodes. I think your boy Zach had a he had a video, or I should look it up, where he talked about what episodes to watch. I think it's the first 3 and the last 4 or something like that. I'll look into that. Maybe I'll watch 1 or 2. But not a huge fan. I feel the Netflix Daredevil show didn't do right by the character. Now, when I say this, let me first off state that the cast is exceptional. I thought they were very good, all of them. Charlie Cox, Vincent D'Onofrio, Deborah Ann Wall, Eldon Henson. All great actors and all giving their best and doing their best. So my complaints about the series is not a reflection on the performances. My problem with the show has ever been more that it's a long, sort of drawn out series that it takes more time than is needed with each and every conversation, with each and every episode, with each and every scene. In fairness, I think they've minimalized that this season. I think I should say from the beginning, before we get into spoilers, that this is, in fact, the best season of the 3. I still have some issues with it, which I will get into in a moment. But for the most part, it is improving on those problems that I said. We don't have quite as many long conversations that go on for 10 minutes, which probably 3 minutes would have been more than enough. Episodes don't feel overly padded. There are 2 or 3 episodes, I think, that were filler-esque. Not too many. The story does feel like it flows pretty normally. I think my other main complaint about Netflix Daredevil is particular to Daredevil, which is I've always felt Daredevil is a character that needs to be a big screen character. Daredevil should be jumping off rooftops, swinging on ropes, giving him the full benefit of a major budgeted motion picture, which obviously they can't do here. I don't like the fact that we never see a point of view of Matt's radar sense from what he sees. I think we got a glimpse of it in the first season once, and that's about it. Also kind of disappointed that the costume isn't a big deal for this show for some reason. He got the traditional Daredevil costume at the end of the first season, wore it throughout the second season, and doesn't wear it at all during the third season. They give him this, what I always refer to as the the Rex Smith black leotard. If you've ever seen Trial of the Incredible Hulk with Rex Smith starring as Daredevil in the Lou Ferrigno, Bill Bixby Hulk reunion movie, you'll know that it looks pretty similar to this. This, of course, isn't a leotard, but it was designed by, of course, none other than Frank Miller for use in what would have been a low-budgeted movie back when people didn't take superheroes seriously and they wouldn't have a guy running around on the big screen in a costume, so he had to create this costume, which you see right before you there, as the substitute. So I'm kind of disappointed in that, and they stuck with that for plot purposes as well in this issue, in this episode, in this season, but we'll get to that in a second. Let me take a sip of water here, and maybe I'll they'll be able to strike on all cylinders now. Okay. I'm going to say briefly before we get into spoilers, I think this season was the best season of the 3 seasons. I think it was paced much better. I think it was probably most comic accurate, if I may be so bold. I think they did their own take on Born Again here. And I was never a big fan of Born Again, the Frank Miller novel. Of course, as a life experience, I'm quite pleased with it, though. But I was never a huge fan of that. I thought that was kind of... It also dealt with a Daredevil-less, Matt Murdock for the most part. But from what they did have of it, it was the best parts, so to speak, of Born Again. I think they also threw in some of... what was Kevin Smith's? That one was Guardian Devil. Or was that The Man Without Fear? I don't know. I'm getting confused. But suffice to say, they did feel like they did a serviceable hodgepodge of some of the storylines and concepts from the comics. They did it their own way. They didn't really stick to any one particular storyline. But again, I felt they carried it off well enough. So I'm going to give Daredevil a passingly positive review, if you're interested. And if you haven't seen it now and you're waiting like me for some kind of, I don't know, DVD release or for another free trip on Netflix, you can wait and then watch the review later, but pretty much a passing review. Alright, so spoiler alert, spoiler alert, spoiler alert. We are going to get deep into the storyline here for Season 3 of Netflix Daredevil. Now, we pick up where, I believe it was the Defenders was the last time we saw Matt Murdock, right? And the building fell on him. It's been so long, I honestly don't remember what happened in Defenders. That's one of those things where I remember liking it when I watched it, but I couldn't tell you what happened in that whole series. I just remember the guys fighting in office building. Really crazy stuff, but nothing about it particularly was memorable, I suppose. This season starts with Matt Murdock returning. He eventually reaches out to his friends, Foggy first, and then eventually Karen. He's hiding out in the church, in like the basement of the church, where Father Lantern, I believe his name is, I'm not sure, his priest that has been in the series from the beginning, and Sister Maggie are attending to him and helping him recover. And, of course, Sister Maggie turns out to be his mom. If you read the comics, that wasn't really a big surprise. But thankfully, they did do a good job with the character of Maggie, I think. The actress, Joanne Whalley, I believe is her name. Gee, I haven't heard that name in a long time. I think she was in Willow, right? I haven't watched that movie in a long time either. But they have sort of a friendly yet contentious relationship, Matt and Sister Maggie. He doesn't know that she's his mother yet. at the beginning of the season, and they spar back and forth a bit on the topic of religion. Of course, if you know anything about me, you're going to know that that's right up my alley. So we're going to take a little time here to talk about that portion where they're talking about religion, where Matt is a Catholic, of course. He never gives up his belief in God, which is something that I appreciated, because I think it's all too easy that a lot of times when they want to have these kind of, moral battles among oneself and their faith and stuff, that the subject turns to be an agnostic, and they try to act like, well, I don't know if God exists and this and that. Matt firmly believes in God. He firmly believes God exists. He just feels abused, and it's one of those questions that, happens to mankind all the time, which is, why does this crap happen to me? And of course, the first thing you turn to when you ask that question is the book of Job. And Job is brought up. Matt calls him a word that I cannot use in this review. Think of Venom and Brock in the elevator scene. I think you'll probably get the idea from the Venom movie. But the one big problem I had with the depiction of the religious battle of the battle of wits between them two is Matt says that God was responsible for torturing Job and the torment that he went through and this and that. That's not exactly the case. Actually, Satan is the one that tortured and tormented Job. God allowed it for his purpose. And interestingly, Sister Maggie doesn't really correct him on that, which I think was kind of a missed opportunity, but it's one of those things where Matt has to arrive at the conclusion himself. And thankfully, the series does kind of give him an arc. I think the religious aspect of it kind of gets dropped after, I don't know, maybe at the halfway point, maybe a quarter way through, and they kind of don't talk about it anymore, but by the end, Matt embraces his Catholicism again, after finding out, his faith takes a hit once he finds out Maggie is his mother, because he overhears her praying, because of course he has the super sensitive hearing. That kind of gives him a setback. He wants to be the Daredevil, but he kind of wants to be the Daredevil on his own terms. He says in his sort of dejected state that God is showing him his true face, which I'm not sure exactly what that means. From what I gather, the way he's acting, and he's acting a little bit of a jerk, if I might say, during these early episodes, but he's acting like God is sort of uncaring. God doesn't really care if he puts you through the trials, which of course is not the case. Again, they don't make a big deal out of it, but by the end, he does sort of embrace that that faith again in God and in Jesus, and he does voice that, the stuff that got thrown his way made him who he is, and that's kind of the lesson, I think, of Job, which is, and I guess, like I said, they could have been a little bit more on the nose. I think this would have actually helped the narrative if they had been a little more on the nose, but the gift of the Daredevil, the heightened senses and all that, is exactly that, a gift. It is not just a curse. The blindness is a curse, but it is a gift given him that he has helped so many people in the past, and he himself, has used to make a difference. And he seems to understand that and embrace that, and that's I think a positive resolution to his struggle, his religious struggle during this whole ordeal. All right, let's look at the flip side here now before we go any further with Matt and his friends. This is also the rise to power of the Kingpin, which I think they did a tremendous job. Vincent D'Onofrio is really exceptional in this role, because the Kingpin, I remember Frank Miller saying the Kingpin was like the Jackie Gleason of Spider-Man villains. He was just a fat guy, bald, nobody took him seriously, until Frank Miller made him out to be sort of, maybe a Mickey Spillane type villain, you know, the film noir type setting, kind of attributing it to him. And again, he carries off that fearsome presence while looking like a big baby, really. You know, he kind of looks like a baby Huey type, you know what I mean? He could just sit there and be kind of sad and sulky, but at the same time he's got like this tremendous fury, this tremendous rage that's in him, that at any moment he could just snap somebody in two. And you know, it's an interesting dynamic that D'Onofrio gives him, because I've gone on record saying before, as everyone knows, I really like the original Daredevil film with Ben Affleck and Michael Clark Duncan, and I always said Michael Clark Duncan made a great Kingpin, but you got to remember, this is a lot more layers to the Kingpin than we've ever seen in live action before. Again, to take anything away from Michael Clark Duncan, because I thought he did a tremendous job. We get to see his rise to power. He is actually called the Kingpin, which I liked. He is wearing the Kingpin suit that he made trademark in the comics, the white satin suit, which is, you know, very befitting of the comic version. He finally gets married to Vanessa, which I thought was an important part. They kind of did it in reverse. I think that's the strange thing that I have with this show's fidelity to the Kingpin. They make him very, you know, it feels very much like the Kingpin from the comics, but the show version, Vanessa is, if not as dangerous as Wilson, I would say she's more dangerous. It's very interesting. In the comics, I believe she was like a shy, retiring Violet type. You know, she didn't really like the gangster wife role, and she didn't really like, you know, what Wilson did for a living, but she kind of stayed by him as his wife. In this case, Vanessa wants more of an active part in his criminal operations, and when he hesitates on anything, she'll be the first one to say, look, this guy could cause us trouble, get rid of him now. And it's an interesting dynamic that I appreciated, while it's not really comic accurate, though. And of course, he's getting married at a much more advanced age here, because, of course, he had a son in the comics that was an adult by this point. I'm glad they brought that actress back to play Vanessa. She's got a very ethnic-sounding name that I'm not going to try to pronounce. But she's very good in this part. She played Superman's mom in the Man of Steel movie. But I would have liked to see a little more of her this season, but I don't think there would have been, you know, I don't think there would have been a place for it. I think it was important where she came in at the end, because, like I said, it kind of capped off what their relationship was. I mean, she's been out of the picture. I don't think she even showed up in the second season, right? And yeah, it's just one of those things where it's hard to believe, but, you know, there is somebody out there for everybody, and if the Kingpin can find somebody that's as devious or more devious than him, you don't have to have any worries, guys. And that was kind of what I felt for it. It was like, you know, it's an interesting dynamic that I really don't believe that we ever seen anywhere else between, you know, a villain and his, you know, potential spouse. All right, let's move on a little bit more here now to, let's talk about Ben Poindexter. Ben Poindexter, a.k.a. Bullseye, which he isn't called Bullseye in the show. He's given an origin in this season, and I'm disappointed that I don't know what they're going to do. I don't think anybody knows what they're going to do from here. I don't know if they are going to try to pick up with the MCU, because they laid a fine groundwork here for Bullseye in another season. Let me see, what's this actor's name? I'm going to look it up fast. Wilson Bethel. He does a phenomenal job, I must say, as the slightly unhinged FBI agent that saves Wilson Fisk during an Albanian gang attack. And he starts out being just the sort of the smarmy guy. I mean, during the story, the Kingpin is taken in. He's trying to do a deal with the FBI. He's trying to make sure that his wife will be safe from prosecution. Of course, she's not married to him at the time, but he wants to bring her back into the country and let her be safe from any prosecution. And all the feds basically are treating him like garbage. And the Kingpin is taking it like a champ. And you kind of even feel sorry for him for, like, maybe a split second when you consider, like, you know, these people will crap in his dinner just as soon as look at him, and he's kind of trying to play nice with them, but, you know, he's still a vicious monster. But he, over the course of the season, kind of worms his way into the beehive of a mind that Poindexter has. And we get to see his backstory. I was all right with the backstory they gave him. I'm not exactly sure what his backstory is in the comics. I was always under the impression he was like a Joker character where, you know, he basically was so psychotic that you really couldn't believe anything that was said about his past. It might be true, it might not be true, but apparently Poindexter killed his Little League coach when he was a kid because he was trying to take him out of the game when he was trying to pitch a no-hitter. He had a relationship with his therapist that went sort of as like a parental relationship she had towards him. And eventually he's kind of tried to keep it all together by being in a rigid structure like the FBI. But when that starts all unwinding through various machinations from the Kingpin, he becomes just an assassin. And again, I thought it was really good. The storyline, of course, as I said, I'm not crazy about the fact that Daredevil is still wearing the first season costume. Particularly because it makes no sense. And again, Daredevil is a character that gets beaten up and carved up routinely, on a routine basis. And the problem is, if you have the access to armor, for lack of a better term, why not use it? He's still going out doing the things he's doing. Even if he doesn't really care about the moniker of Daredevil anymore, he is still Daredevil, and it would protect him to do the things he has to do with that suit on. Instead, he kind of completely gives it up. And I don't think that makes any sense. Also, you have to remember, these characters, now everybody would sort of scoffs at the notion that they're lunchbox characters. I mean, Daredevil, they've always tried to treat him as sort of the grown-ups superhero, but again, he needs to be having that iconic look. You know, no matter which way you look at it, he needs to look like the Daredevil. He looks like a guy in, you know, sweatpants and and a bandana over his head. It's disappointing that he doesn't have that. But there is the plot purpose that Kingpin's plan is to discredit the Daredevil by making the man who would be Bullseye wear the red traditional Daredevil costume and commit his crimes, and blaming them on the original Daredevil. And the problem is, like I said, at no point does he ever resume that mantle, that costume. So for the whole season, he's just wearing the black outfit. But they do the whole thing where Bullseye has the tremendous accuracy. He can use anything as a weapon. I don't think they went too overboard in that. They didn't show him killing people with peanuts and paper clips like in the movie. But, you know, shards of glass, I don't know, pencils. I think he used like some stuff like that. One of the things that made me laugh, because that's one of the problems with the Netflix series, is the humor is very dry. They take it so seriously that they're, you know, other than maybe a dry offhand comment, you really won't get any humor. But I don't know if it was unintentionally funny or not, but there's a scene where they're in the newspaper office, and Bullseye, dressed as Daredevil, is trying to kill the witness that they have there. They're taking a statement. And Bullseye is like throwing things that are bouncing off the wall, ricocheting off a cubicle, and hitting Daredevil in the head. And I don't know if that was supposed to be funny, but also the way they have the speed, they've got like the film moving at a slightly higher frame rate or something. It is just so hilarious. It looks like he's throwing things in double time, and it's banging off a wall and hitting Daredevil in the kisser. I had to say, I had an outright laugh out loud moment with that scene. It was so funny. But the drama between the two played up pretty well. We got, I always love, I'm a sucker for, if you want to know how to really get me into a good guy, bad guy, relationship, adversarial relationship, always do the telephone call. I love the good guy, bad guy phone conversation. And they had one of those at the end. For reference, I think Iron Man 2, there was one between Vanko and Stark, and that one was pretty good. Of course, the classic Khan one from Kirk and Khan. When it's like guys are like not close enough to strangle each other, but they still can't stand each other, and they are talking, and Daredevil's kind of like goading Poindexter to, come to him and hash out the problem. It was really good, and I like the way they did that, and it kind of sets the stage for the end fight where Bullseye's like would-be girlfriend was killed by Fisk. I kind of have to wonder why Poindexter would believe Daredevil when he told him that his girlfriend was killed by Fisk, but it's obvious to the rest of us is the point. But for someone who's like I said, got a head full of bees, I don't know if that would be something that he would be able to latch onto. But he does go after Fisk at the end. We're kind of getting ahead of ourselves by getting to the end before I talk about some of the other side characters and plots that I want to get to. But since we're on this trail, let's just finish up the story proper. At Fisk's wedding, Matt kind of has a reckless plan. Now, let's focus on this for a minute. Now, I really love the fact that they did not shy away from the fact that Daredevil doesn't kill. They even let him kill in the movie with Ben Affleck, which as much as I love that movie, didn't really sit well with me. This is something that the directors and writers of Batman movies can't seem to understand. That the hero has a code, and in that code, they don't kill. And Daredevil has that belief not to kill, and of course it's also a religious belief, taking root in his Catholicism. And so he has to wrestle with this question of, am I going to kill Fisk? Is that the only way? Because, as we said, Fisk in this storyline, he elevates himself by playing the FBI and getting his hooks in all the other, 5 families of New York's crime, and he basically gets everything as a puppet master, and with the help of Bullseye, basically pulls all the strings together. Now, the only way that Matt thinks he can stop him at this point is to kill him, Fisk, because he's played the justice system, he's played the FBI, he's played basically, everything. The jury has been tampered with. There's no way really he can be stopped, and so he comes to an epiphany of, is it possible that there is no way for Fisk to be brought to justice without killing him? Of course, Foggy believes he should be tried. And so you have the dichotomy there of, the lawyer Matt Murdock and his beliefs in the justice system and the law and order of society, going up against the Daredevil and his grim justice, being a vigilante, being outside the law. It's the contradiction of the character really played out well. And, I think that was a great thing to zero in on. So I'm very, very happy with what they've done here. Of course, he makes the right choice, and he, it's basically a 3-way battle. Now, like I was saying, what I was alluding to before getting to this is, Matt takes sort of a risky chance on sicking Bullseye after the Kingpin at the Kingpin's wedding. Because obviously, Kingpin killed his girlfriend. I don't know what her name, Julie, I think her name was. And so obviously, it didn't take a genius to figure out that Bullseye would probably go after Vanessa. But Matt still uses Bullseye to sort of get him in the door, to get him past security, to get him past the cops, because the cops, cordoned off the whole Fisk wedding and this and that. So, again, that's kind of a reckless thing that I'm not sure Daredevil would do, but apparently he did. It was a cool setup, though. It could have turned out very, very badly, though, for all involved. Fisk ends up taking out Bullseye in the Daredevil costume still, by breaking his back, which leads to, I guess, this is like the sort of after credits scene, which you would call an after credits tag, where Bullseye is being operated on, and he opens his eyes during the operation, which is frightening enough, and you can see the Bullseye symbol in his eye, leading one to believe that Bullseye will return in the next season, should there have been another season. I know in the comics, they even ended the original Daredevil movie with Bullseye in the hospital, with paralysis or whatever. In the comics, he did have a back injury, and it turned out that I think he was given an adamantium spinal injection or something to cure him. So it is a pretty good foregone conclusion that he'll be back one way or the other. Fisk ends up being the one doing it. I know Daredevil did it in the first movie, but crippled him by throwing him out the window. I guess it comes off better that Fisk does it, because basically trying to cripple a guy and breaking his back is, it's just a step away from killing him. So, all right, so let's see. Matt ends up beating Fisk within an inch of his life, and Fisk is pretty much unrepentant, and he claims he is going to kill Foggy and Karen, and that he'll, expose Matt's identity, because at this point he has guessed that Matt is the Daredevil. And Matt even removes the mask to confirm this fact, which is something else that I don't like when they do. Although in this case, it seemed like it was already a foregone conclusion that Fisk knew, so I don't know if this was really, I don't know if this was sort of a plot or anything that would have been ruined if he didn't do that. Of course, I probably wouldn't have had him do that, but in any regard, he makes a deal with Fisk not to go after Karen and Foggy, and he won't try to convict Vanessa for her part in the killing of the who's the guy that she killed? She had him executed. I don't know. One of his underlings. So they kind of have a handshake deal, and it's one of those things like almost again like the Daredevil movie, where it's like Fisk isn't going to say anything because he doesn't want to say he got beat by a blind man. And so they're also doing a version of that here, where it's like, well, Fisk is, he's so crazy in love with Vanessa that he doesn't really care about anything else except her safety and happiness. So he's willing to sort of let, bygones be bygones, so to speak. Interesting way to leave it. I really like that the end of the show also seemed to... It's sort of brought everything back full circle. If you didn't know better, you would think maybe they were intending for this to be the end of the show, because Kingpin's back in jail. The chances of him playing the system again and getting out and being a member of society is probably pretty low. Matt has, gotten back together with Karen and Foggy, and the suggestion, at least, is that they're going to go back into business in their own law firm. Karen left the Bulletin, I think it is, the New York paper, and now she's going to join them as more of a investigator, which is kind of interesting. Let's talk about Karen and Foggy a little bit now. Well, let's talk about Foggy first, because it's really a much more superficial story, even though it was a good story for Foggy, I thought. He reconciles with Matt, and he basically tries to run for DA in order to get some things working in the pipe to sort of undercut what Fisk's plans are. And he pretty much, he pretty much does this for his own protection, but his parents and brother are also put in the crosshairs, because obviously as an elected official or running for office, he can't be, attacked or assassinated without suspicion. And so, they put him in a predicament that he, has to back down, otherwise his parents will go to jail and his brother will go to jail. An interesting storyline. I think they did right by him. They finally paid off on the Karen backstory. They gave us like a half-hour flashback showing exactly what happened, because from the little bits and pieces we gleaned of her backstory, it was a very kind of confusing story about what happened with her. She was basically a druggie, a junkie kind of. I don't think she was so far gone, I suppose, where she couldn't get out of that lifestyle, because it seems like she got out of it pretty easily. I mean, she didn't really it didn't look like she needed months of therapy and, detox or something. She seemed to kind of just give it up. But apparently, she was running with a pretty wild crowd. Her boyfriend was also into selling the drugs with her and stuff. She ended up trying to leave her diner that her father and brother also owned or worked at. And eventually, her brother tries to stop her, and he ends up getting into a fight with her boyfriend. The boyfriend beats on him with like a lead pipe, and then she shoots the boyfriend, which is non-fatal as far as I could tell, which just raises the question exactly what happened to that boyfriend. And then she drives off with her brother, who's in a beaten condition, but he ends up, she's so high that he ends up getting killed when she crashes the car. And that was sort of the tragic backstory. They, I remember doing the video for Seasons 1 and Seasons 2, and saying I was wondering how they were going to sort of pay off the Karen having, like, all the moral foibles that they foisted upon her in the comics, which, if you don't know, was basically she became a porn actress, became a drug addict, became a Skid Row prostitute, got AIDS but didn't really get AIDS, ratted out Matt's secret identity. It was basically just this laundry list of, like, soap opera-esque, degenerate plots that they really should have never been, and then she ends up dying. So they kind of paid service to that a little bit with making her sort of a junkie at first, and sort of trying to pull out of that after her, lifestyle ended up killing her brother. So not bad. I guess that was kind of the way to go with that storyline. Wasn't disappointed too much with it. Her storyline here also, she kind of loses her job because she won't out Daredevil. And again, I think what they did pretty much this season, which I think was a good idea, was they pretty much flipped the script. They flipped everything on its head. Instead of Karen falling to drugs and so forth, she started out with drugs and then cleaned her life up. That's a more positive message, and I like that better. And in the same way, instead of ratting Matt out and then taking the consequences, she loses her job and takes the consequences for not ratting Matt out. It does seem to feel a lot more positive. Now, I can understand if somebody wants complete fidelity to the comic storyline, then yeah, you're probably going to be disappointed, but I think it was better because, like I said, I think that was too much of a pile-on between Frank Miller and Kevin Smith. pile-on of too much stuff that was sort of a melodramatic potboiler. And, you know, it just doesn't work really, especially in a live action. Let's see. So she loses her job and kind of just works behind the scenes to try to bring Fisk to justice. Let's see. What else? Yeah, Deborah Ann Wall is a good actress. I just like to point that out. I really haven't given Charlie Cox the props that he should get too. I think he's a fantastic actor. And there was just some sick action scenes. Wow. Really great action scenes here where, again, they like to do everything in one shot. They have a prison escape scene where Matt is fighting, and you can kind of see where they're trying to put the camera so the stuntman comes in, does a little stuff, then they get Charlie in, and he does some stuff, and then they get him out, and the stunt double in. It was a really good and inventive scene, and there were a couple of great scenes. You know, there was the fight scene at the end with Daredevil and Bullseye. That was great. There was some more good action scenes throughout the whole series, so it was really good for action. As I said, one of my disappointments is we don't have the spectacle. We don't see Daredevil jumping off buildings and swinging on the billy club, and a lot of stuff that you want to see in a superhero movie you can't get on this show. I think you even get more on the CW. I've famously said that before in terms of like superhero spectacle. But for the show being what it is, I think that they gave us some pretty good action. This is the first season, at least of Daredevil to my knowledge, where we didn't get an appearance of Turk. Turk did not show up, and we didn't get an appearance of Night Nurse, Rosario Dawson's character. I don't remember her name, but I don't think they were needed. I didn't really miss them. I kind of thought they would throw in a reference to Turk, maybe just to, you know, make him have his kind of cameo or something, but no. Let's see, anything else before we wrap it up here? I typically don't like too much gore and too much cursing. For the gore, I would say it's just on par with sort of an R-rated movie. You know, gunshots, blood splats. There really wasn't no disgusting, you know, head getting chopped off like in some other seasons. You know, hands getting chopped off or the like. No, nothing like that. This was pretty much, if you can handle a R-rated crime drama, you probably could handle this. Me, I like I said, I have an aversion to the gore and the really gory stuff. In this case, there was nothing that really made me feel too repulsed. As far as the cursing goes, they take the Lord's name in vain a bunch, which I wasn't too thrilled with, particularly in a series where Catholicism is the main character's you know, background. It seemed like there was a lot of taking the Lord's name in vain. And I don't think there was an abundance of curse words, but there was a few. There was probably less than last 2 seasons combined, where it was just like, that's kind of the point. I mean, I don't like the cursing because it's like 90% of the time it's not necessary, and the other 10% of the time it's only necessary because you make it necessary. Like in this case is what I mean. You really didn't need to have any curse words in this series, but it's like, at least in this case, they used them judiciously, so it didn't feel like the first 2 seasons where it was like, blah, 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 we gotta say a curse word here because we're Netflix and we're a TVM over here, throw another one in, over here, throw them. In this case, at least it felt more organic, like, well, we went like maybe an episode and a half without saying something. They say one word and they don't say that curse word again for maybe another episode. You know, it didn't feel like it was an overabundance. Let's talk about Nadeem. Nadeem is a character also I wanted to touch on fast before we get through. He was a character that I knew was going to have a big part in the show, because when they first introduced him, I kind of felt like, oh, we're gonna stick with this guy. This is not going to be just a, you know, a quick one-off character that's going to be in 2 episodes and that's it. And true to the fact, he was a big character throughout. And he basically is the ace in the hole for Matt to, you know, get, you you know, try to get Wilson Fisk on the ropes. I was worried that I was going to get sick of him. I didn't get sick of him. He was a good character, a good actor. Let me see if I can find his name as well. He probably has another name that I can't pronounce. Jay Ali? Is that his name? I'm not sure. Yes. So yeah, he did quite well. I was quite pleased with his role. He starts off as a FBI agent. He's trying to do the right thing. He's trying to do the right thing by his family. Eventually, he ends up falling in with Poindexter and finding out that the Kingpin is behind the FBI. His boss basically killed, you know, an agent in front of him to silence them. And you know, and then he kind of has the moral crisis where he has to do the suicide play, and he wants to keep his family safe, so he basically does a dying confession because he knows Bullseye's going to kill him. It's a very powerful scene. It's a very powerful performance. I was questioning whether that was admissible in court, because I don't really know that you could do that, but according at least to the show, Foggy says that basically a dying declaration is supposed to be treated as, you know, at least for the most part, treated as fact. It has to be treated as if, you know, the person knows they're going to die and they're going to say the truth, knowing that they're clearing their conscience before they die. Yeah, and so he goes out as a hero. He doesn't go out as a punk. He tries to pull on Bullseye. Bullseye draws on him first and takes him out. So again, it was a pretty good performance. The biggest problem, I think, with perhaps the character of Nadeem and some of the other sort of peripheral stuff, which, you know, that's the stuff I think is going to be harder to take on the rewatch. Because looking back at the first 2 seasons of Daredevil, I only rewatched the last episode of the first season. The you know, when you have Fisk doing his little soliloquy about the Good Samaritan, and then you have the fight with Daredevil. That was a good episode. I revisit that a couple of times. In Season 2, I liked the first, I think, 4 episodes. I've said before that the first 4 episodes could have been a good Daredevil movie with the Punisher, where you have Daredevil crossing off against the Punisher and seeing how both of their worldviews are in conflict. That was a really good couple of episodes. And then when they got into the hand stuff, I started losing interest. This season, I don't really know that there were episodes that I would pull back to watch as much as it was consistently good all the way through. There wasn't a drop-off. There wasn't like the first season of Daredevil where I was like bored for like a good 80% of it. And Season 2, where it started off strong and then I was completely disinterested in the middle and then it picked up a little bit at the end. Here it's consistent all the way through. I don't think there are 2 or 3 episodes that you need to sit and watch again. I would probably say, again, the last episode is the most important. I would say maybe the episode where they're in the office and they're trying to take the statement and Bullseye kind of reveals himself in the Daredevil costume. Those are a couple of the highlights, but it's pretty much consistent all the way through. There's no, like, exemplary episodes and there's no completely horrible episodes that you want to pass. I think it's something you want to take all the way through from beginning to end. And like I said, there are some dull parts that have to do with Nadeem and sort of the jockeying for position to try to find out how they're going to bring Fisk down. Some of that, like I said, probably will bore you on the rewatch, but I think watching it for the first time through, it was very, very well put together and entertaining. So no problems there. All right, let's see. Is there anything else before we wrap it up? Let's see. We talked about, yes, Karen, Foggy, Matt. Apparently, Matt makes up with Sister Maggie. They do a flashback with Sister Maggie and show how she met Jack, Daredevil's dad. It's kind of a strange thing, to be honest. I really don't I really don't know if I would buy that story where before she takes her vows, she's like a upcoming nun, and very young too. She looks like she's about 18, 17, something like that. And she decides to go to a boxing match with a couple of other teenage nuns. And the boxer is Jack Murdock, and he looks to be about, I don't know, 30 years old. Being generous, maybe 30 years old. And he calls her up to the corner to be his corner man, you know, in between rounds. And he's sort of talking jocular to her and, you know, cursing and so forth. And it seems like, you know, a very strange, what would the attraction hold for a nun and you know, sort of an ill-tempered boxer. And then they flash forward to, I guess, she dropped out of the, you know, nunnery or whatever, and ended up marrying Jack, and then for whatever reason, after, I don't know, maybe a year of marriage and having Matt, she sort of gets like postpartum depression and wants to go back to the nunnery. So again, it's kind of a strange thing. I don't really know how they handled that in the comics, but she seemed like a sort of a feisty nun, so maybe that's what that was all about. Also, yeah, let's touch on also the death of Father Paul Lanton, I think is his name. Yeah, he was, again, Matt sort of confronts him over the lie that he didn't lie, but he didn't tell him that Sister Maggie was his mother. And eventually, Bullseye comes for Karen in the church, and Father Paul gives his life when Bullseye tries to kill Karen. Again, flipping it on its head, the concept from the comics of Kevin Smith killing Karen Page, which didn't go over well back then, and it still doesn't go over well with me now that they had Karen Page killed off. They already did that with Elektra. They didn't need to do that with Karen. And thankfully they didn't hear. And they keep playing up the fact that, oh, is Karen going to get killed, kind of. You know, I think everybody is expecting Karen's going to get killed. I don't think Bullseye wants to kill her anymore, so I don't think she has to worry about that. But for most of the second half of the season, she's hiding out from Bullseye, who is, you know, tasked with killing her. I also thought, since we're talking about Karen again, I think it was interesting that they had her spill the beans that she killed Wesley. I'm not sure that that was such a good idea. She's trying to get Kingpin to do something to act out in front of the FBI, and so she basically tells him to his face that she killed his best friend, Wesley. Now, also, Foggy and Matt find out about this too. I don't have a problem so much with the fact that she killed Wesley, or, you know, it was arguably self-defense, and I don't have a problem with her telling Matt and Foggy. I think that kind of unburdens her a little bit, but telling Fisk, I think, was kind of a step too far, where even the most, you know, even the most brave and gutsy human being would probably reconsider that choice, you know. It does feel a little, I don't know, it does feel like a little bit too much that she killed him, though, and doesn't get away with it, because very few murders don't take their toll mentally, because it doesn't seem like she has too much of a mental problem with this, seeing as how she seems okay with it. But then again, she was handling a gun when she was shooting her boyfriend, so psychologically she seems all right. And again, you know, it's kind of, in the real world, tough to, I would imagine, get away with murder like she has. I don't think the show really rewards her for that, but again, it's like, I don't know, it kind of sits oddly in the grand scheme of things, because also Karen, of course, is a big proponent of Matt not killing Kingpin. She does say at one point, maybe he's right, maybe Kingpin has to go, but she basically is not for Matt killing, because she knows that that's something that would, you know, basically ruin him. And it ruins most people, and I don't think that she speaks out of experience from that, but it is sort of the, you know, like I said, the de facto storyline that Batman should have, but never seems to get. Okay, so we'll wrap it up here with that. Thank you for joining me for this hour. If you, in fact, made it through the whole hour, make sure you leave your comments below. What did you like and not like about Daredevil Season 3? How did it stand up against the other seasons of Daredevil? I would put this one number 1, Season 2 number 2, and Season 1 last. As far as all the Netflix shows go, the ones I've seen, this is a very strong one. I would say it's probably the best that Netflix had to offer. Like I said, I kind of liked Iron Fist Season 1. And I think I like Defenders, although I can't really remember it. So those would be the top 3. Daredevil Season 2 was okay, and Iron Fist Season 2 was also okay. So that might be the top 5. I don't know, after that, maybe Luke Cage Season 2. The rest you can kind of forget about. So, yeah, make sure you let me know what you think. Do you like all the Netflix shows? Do you like just the Daredevil ones? Or are you going to be sad to see that there's not going to be a Season 4 of Daredevil now that they've come out and said that Netflix no longer has the rights to the property? Do you want to see the MCU pick up where the Netflix series left off, bringing in Charlie Cox, Deborah Ann Woll, and Vincent D'Onofrio? Or do you just want them to start over from scratch? Do you think they should have Daredevil return on the big screen or the small screen? All questions that need to be answered. Also, I will give my actual rating here. I think it's kind of tough. I gave Daredevil Season 1 and 2 3.5 stars. Do I go for the 3.5 stars here again? I am going to give Daredevil Season 3 4 stars out of 5. That's right, 4 stars out of 5. It's tentative. I might give it 3.5 stars on the rewatch because this is a show, like I said, I don't know that the rewatch is going to be as much fun. But for a first viewing, I would say 4 stars out of 5, and that would be probably a B-. I would give the show a B-. Great performances, well-handled plot. The action was also more than adequate. It was not as good as I would like to see for the Daredevil, but is a step above the last 2 seasons. Also, I think they cut down a little bit on the profanity, which bothered me. They cut down a lot on the gore, which made me happy. They didn't have him in costume, but I'm gonna kind of grade it on the curve for that. That would normally be like a 2-point deduction, honestly. But the purpose of the plot said that Daredevil would be impersonated by Boomerang, so I kind of understand where you got him wearing the old costume. I would, if there were a Season 4, would need to see the costume, otherwise I would probably give an automatic 2-10 deduction. Alright, so there we have it for Daredevil Season 3. And so, until next we meet, this is Johnnie Torch reminding you once again, keep the flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you again real soon.